unless you are a functional psychopath. And there are, believe me, functional psychopaths for whom the brain is wired differently. In general, if there is negative and positive emotion impinging on a neural circuitry, the negative will win out. This whole notion of loss aversion. That's just to kind of preserve us, right, all the time. And by the way, if you compare, and that's a conclusion we'll come to here, is that when you compare emotion versus cognition, or emotion versus rational, you'll start seeing that the rational brain is simply a slave to the emotional brain. It simply cannot survive the onslaught from the emotional system. That if you want to be decisive, you want to be confident moving forward, after you're faced with a trade-off conflict, that you really want to harness the power of emotion in shaping your decision. You don't want to become a Vulcan under such context, and here are some of the factors that I'll get into, what we have found in our research. If you start with price, and I'm putting this in quotes, in other words, we're talking about money, salary, the price of the option, you tend to become a Vulcan. If that is the first attribute you're looking at. And that's why I tell sales, and I was in sales before, I tell salespeople that even if you're working for a price leader, like Dell, for example, where your major thrust is price, never start the conversation with your customer with price, because you're going to make that individual a Vulcan. Okay? The other factor we have seen is that if you do become analytical, if you adopt the Benjamin Franklin technique, Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of our nation, what did he say? He said that if you're faced with a trade-off conflict, what do? Well, you kind of look at all the positives and list down all the negatives of the various options and choose that option with the greatest number of positives and the least number of negatives. Now, if you do that, you'll become a Vulcan. The other thing that we found is that if you're fearful of committing a mistake, you become a Vulcan. That is, you're fearful of committing a type 1. Those of you who are familiar with statistics, you know about the errors out there, type 1 error versus type 2 error, right? Type 1 error is being fearful of committing a mistake, versus a type 2 error is being fearful of losing out on an opportunity. Many of you here, especially in the innovation space, will traditionally be this type 2 individuals. You're fearful of losing out on an opportunity rather than fearful of making a mistake. If you're fearful of losing out on an opportunity, you don't see this volcanism showing up. The best, of course, you see this emotional, clear kind of decisive decisions being made is when you are hopeful of a favorable option. There is no fear element involved at all. And the last factor, this is very recent that we have identified, is the lack of sleep, especially deep sleep. If you don't get enough of the deep sleep component, sleep has different cycles, right? It's got the light sleep, the REM sleep, and so on. And one of them is the deep sleep cycle. If you don't get enough of the deep sleep cycle, you'll also end up becoming a Vulcan. You won't be able to make very decisive decisions. So think about the next time you're traveling, let us say to Hong Kong and Singapore and so on, and then you're ending up with negotiations and making decisions. In general, you will end up making bad decisions.